And I made in that bunker a promise. I said, God, if you'll get me out of here, if you'll let me see my baby and my wife, I will do my very best to live these principles.
Make no mistake about it. You were born to be a true millennial.
So I have today with me Buddy Ray Zoll. This is my grandfather-in-law, one of my favorite men on this planet. He has one of the most tremendous stories I've ever heard of coming from a broken background, broken family, and has chosen to start a legacy of faith and has carried on through his children and now me, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. And we are all tremendously blessed because of the decisions he made early on in his life to break that chain of dysfunction and start a new chain of faith. And it's a very inspiring journey that I wanted to share so that others can benefit from his story and see that anybody can break that chain, start a new chain, or return to a chain that has been broken in the past. And so, Bud, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time.
I'm really grateful. I'm privileged to be here because Parker Walbeck is also one of my favorite grandchildren. I know your heart, your faith, you're a patriot, and I know what a great man you are with your family. So it's a privilege to be here. I don't know how you talked me into this, but here I am.
It was painful, but we got him here, and it's like pulling teeth. But Bud's here, and we're going to hear a story from beginning to end. And kind of the theme of this chat is I just want to hear what pivotal decisions you made in each step of your life that allowed you to break away from that chain of dysfunction and start your chain of faith, and how you kind of grew into that, and then ultimately where it's led you today. So starting off, just give us the background. Tell us about your family life growing up. What was it like? Where did you live and all that?
All right. I don't like talking about myself and this history, but I will do this for you and I guess my posterity. I started out a pretty dysfunctional life. My mother was born in Indiana, named Dorothy. Beautiful young lady, but a terrible life. She was a foster child herself, thrown out of foster care. She ended up living on the streets. My mother had to become whatever it took to be a lady of the night to survive. And she got involved with a lot of men early that gave her difficulty, and she actually got pregnant and had an abortion, and it was a terrible experience for her. And she was working out of Columbus, Ohio. That's where I was born. And the war was just ending, and my father, one whom I've never met, named Harrison Flint, actually, came home from the war, and on kind of a short experience with my mom, got her pregnant. My mother considered the abortion. I'm glad she didn't. But she considered it very seriously. But she's 28 years old and had a very difficult life and decided that she was going to keep me. And the authorities, after my mother and father didn't get married, were going to take me away because of her lifestyle. So she took me and hitchhiked to Florida, where I guess I was raised on coconut milk. And she kept me as her only love and her only baby, and bless her heart, let her rest in peace. It was she had a 10th grade education, no chance in life. And she just had me, her own little son, who at that time, my name was Charles Arthur Harley. She named me after the guy she was thinking about marrying. And she ultimately was able to meet another guy named Grant, who she married, my stepfather, who was extremely abusive. Worked on the UP Railroad, a switchman. They call him a dirty neck switchman. And he actually raised me till I was 16, where they lived together. They went through several attempted divorces. I actually watched my stepfather break my mother's jaw, drag her through the backyard by the hair. I would call the police many, many times with this domestic violence that was going on. And they had 2 kids, my 2 half-brothers. And I was never close to them because they were close to Grant. Grant hated me. And so I never got to be close to my half-brother. So I just kind of lived a really pretty miserable, lonely life. As a young boy, my stepfather I guess, disliked me because I was some reminder of my mother's prior situation. And he knew I was illegitimate, so he named me a wormy neck bastard, was the term he called me all the time. I learned to really dislike him and took abuse from him. He would whoop on me and on my mom. And we had a really dysfunctional life. We moved around from home to home, city to city, state to state, on welfare occasionally, on and off. I remember going in different schools, different elementary schools and in junior high schools, at least 4 or 5 different schools.
Wow.
So we never had any foundation. I never had any religion. Then we ended up ending up in Compton, California. That's where I learned to fight for a living. And
When you say for a living, what do you mean?
well, to survive, I think.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Not like professional boxing.
no, I did later become a fighter.
Yeah.
I joined a club called Stan's Boxing Club, had 19 ring fights, took the AAU Golden Gloves.
Wow.
So that taught me a little discipline. It taught me a little bit of self-confidence because I had none, being raised by a stepfather who was very abusive. Well, after we moved we moved from Compton, California, we moved to, of all places, Provo, Utah. My stepdad got a transfer there to the railroad station. And the thing I remember most about Utah was how my stepfather hated Mormons. He called them a cult. He said that they were all polygamous, they all intermarry one another, and that's why he would call them soft-headed Mormons. And he continued his abusive ways. And while I was there, I was running with some bad kids, actually in Provo, Utah. A couple of kind of sub-gang kids were teaching me some ways. Probably you asked me what some events that changed my life. Probably the first real event came there in the house in Provo, where one day my stepfather, Grant, he worked swing shift, and he came out and he said, "You woke me up." And I said, "No, I didn't." And because he had to sleep all the time. He said, "Yeah, you did. You woke me up." And I go, "I didn't wake you up." He says, "Don't you talk back to me." He would give me that all the time. And I said, "I'm telling you, I didn't wake you up." That was a talking back.
Yeah.
I remember it so clearly, so long ago. I was 16. And he, as usual, came swinging at me. He was going to give me this big roundhouse like he usually did. He either hit me in the stomach or he tried to hit me in the jaw. And he had these big roundhousers, I had learned, And at that moment, it just clicked. I can whoop him. There was, 12, 13 years of build-up hate, animosity for my stepfather and what he did to me and my mom and how he'd moved us around and the miserable life that we'd had. And all of a sudden, I had this method of fighting that came back to me. And I just let it loose. Left, right, knocked him down, had him on the floor, hitting on him, getting ready. And I looked up, and my mom was up there watching, and she's right there. And I look up at my mom, I'm going, "Huh." And you know what my mom said? "Hit him again, buddy." So I did. Well, that was the first event that was kind of challenging for me and what to do with my life. And it was, Grant then ordered me out of the house. I didn't have anywhere to go. And I talked to a friend of mine that I knew there in high school named Manny Martinez. I said, "Hey, I've been kicked out of my house. Can I come stay with you?" And I just had bought me a car. I worked at Fastest Dishwasher, Grandview Cafe, they said that they'd ever had. I said, "Can I come live with you?" And he went and asked his mom and dad, Manuel and Sylvia Martinez, who I love these people to the day I die. They took me in. They had 6 kids, Catholic family. I love the Catholics. Took in this wayward, troubled kid that just beat up his stepdad, who was in trouble. I was just getting in trouble in high school, just barely starting at Orm High School. And they took me in. And along with another couple, a friend of mine named Terry Ivers, they let me stay at their house. So I'd bounce back and forth. I lived at Martinez's, I lived at Ivers, and I lived in my car.
Wow.
Mostly through high school. And
Did you ever go back and visit mom or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would visit,
Yeah.
but I couldn't stay there.
Yeah.
And my mom finally did divorce Grant and gain her freedom. So anyway, after I was moving back and forth in these different times, I was also learning how to box at Stan's Boxing Club, and I was hanging with the wrong guys and getting into trouble. And I got kicked out of high school a whole bunch of times, had a D- average. I pulled a fire alarm once. I beat up a couple of guys. My life was, in those days, called Eat, Drink, and Be Merry. For tomorrow you die. That was becoming my life. I think we call it YOLO now. You only live once. And so I was kind of into that realm. That was how I was feeling my own sense of freedom, I think, after the dysfunctional childhood I had been through. At Orem High, though, there was a second event that happened that was really life-changing, and that was a football coach named Udell Westover. And he saw me out after the fighting in the parking lot, dropping out of school, not showing up for school. And he was a guy that cared about people. And he cornered me in the hall once and he said, "Hey, buddy, you look like you could be athletic," because I'd been boxing then. He said,
Yeah.
"Why don't you come play football?" And I go, "I don't know much about football." He said, "Come on in." He put a football uniform on me. I was a really good football player. He took an interest in me.
Yeah.
At that moment, I thought, there are people who really care about you, maybe. Martinez, Ivers, and Coach Westover. But in high school, I was a troubled kid, and I had no support from home or anything. I didn't know what you're supposed to do or not do. And so I went to these counselors they had me go to. And the counselor told me, I'll never forget, point blank, "Look at your grades, look at your history." He says, "You need to join the Army." He says, "If you don't, you're going to prison." That's what he told me. And about that same time, they had these big elections in high school that the whole high school would vote on different guys in the high school. Now, for example, the guy that was the most foul-mouthed of all, that would swear and F-bomb everybody, he got voted Mr. Vocabulary. I was voted most likely to succeed, which meant the most unlikely to succeed. So I go through high school, just kind of a mess. As much as my stepfather hated the LDS Church and Christianity, and we had nothing to do with religion, these two young boys that were LDS missionaries that I didn't know anything about, were wearing these little black tags, found me and said, "We want to talk to you."
Where did they find you?
They found me. I was over at the Martinez's, actually, a Catholic family. They knocked on that door. I'm there, and they said, "We want to teach you about the gospel and life." And I go, "Yeah, I know about you cultists. Forget it." But you know what? There was this kid from Idaho. He was a big football player. For some reason, we just sort of interacted. He says, "Just give me a chance to tell you what's going on. What's going on with your life?" He says, "I'm getting ready to graduate here, I think, and I'm not sure I'm interested in any of that religion and stuff, especially from you Mormons. I know you're a cult." And they talked me in to listen to this first discussion. And then I ended up over at Ivers' house, where they were Mormons, and I didn't really realize it, but I saw what a good family they were. And they taught me the discussions. And for the first time in my life, I saw that there was something other than YOLO. For the first time in my life, I felt something that was different, where they would pray. They taught me how to pray. They taught me the basic principles of the gospel. And I loved those two guys because they were like Coach Westover to me. They act like they really cared.
Yeah.
And they said, "Will you join the church?" And I said, "Sure." And I got baptized. And it was a marvelous experience for that little window where
How old were you when you got baptized?
I just about 16, 17. But I never went to church. When they left, and I ended up moving mostly to the Ivers' house. And I never really learned what the gospel was, learned what the church networking was. I didn't go to any church activities or anything.
Yeah.
But I felt something about it that stayed with me, and now I'm a member of the church. I was a teacher. I think they made me a teacher right off. So after high school was kind of another event leading up to this. I had no idea what to do, but I developed a love for the game of blackjack. I decided to go to Lake Tahoe to see if I could be a blackjack dealer. I thought I would like it. I was too young to be a dealer, so they made me a security guard, still too young, but they let me do that, and I was a runner for the casinos. I'd stay up all night, and they were just going to keep working me to death, so I'd work all night, sleep all day. I had a little billet in the back of this casino, and I was miserable. I had no friends. I had the casino. I was working all the time. I didn't have football, the thing to rely on. I wasn't boxing. And I was at this state of despair for me. I had no idea what this punk, young, vandalistic troublemaker, almost high school dropout had for a future. I had no family. My mother would let me come and see her once in a while. I have no grandparents. I had no friends. The Martinez's would let me come and see them. And one night, this is probably the big second event. You asked me the changes of my life. I decided to do what those missionaries taught me. It just clicked on me. They said, you really can have a conversation with God through prayer. I wasn't sure about that, but I decided to give it a try. And one night, it's late at night, I'm in my little lousy, ugly billet by myself, and I got down on my knees, and I just remembered to open the prayer, and Father, I said, I don't know what my life is about or what's to become of me. I would like some direction. I have no clue what I'm supposed to be or do, which I didn't. And all of a sudden, I had this a voice, actually. Only had this one other time. That said, call the coach. I knew immediately what that meant. I had found out in high school that there was a couple of football coaches, and one of them was in Southern Utah University, and it's called College of Southern Utah. And I found, for some reason, I'd learned his name, Bill Risky, and I knew I was supposed to call him. And I couldn't wait. I called him the next day. Hey, this is Bud Zoll. You know, I was a really good football player at Orem High. You know what? I think I should come play football in college. And he goes, okay, tell me a little about yourself. Basically, I'm a high school dropout, but I was a good football player. And the only reason I didn't make state in my senior year, I was all region before, is because me and my friends stole a couple of horses and we were riding them, and my horse fell down and crashed and burned. I broke my leg during the quarterfinals, or I would have been all state.
We stole some horses.
We did. We stole them. We did that stuff all the time. And I thought, how stupid was that? But wrecked my football career. But anyway, I'm telling this Coach Risky, and he says, well, you know what? We happen to have we have one scholarship left, because I said, if I come play football, can I get a scholarship? Because I don't have any money. And he said, well, I got one football scholarship left, and it happens to be for that spot. But there's an All-American that's looking for that spot as a defensive end and cornerback. And he said, you want to come down there and try? You're open. And he told me where to go, and he says, they'll put me up, they'll feed me. And I said, I'm on the way, Coach. I packed up everything I had that day, hitchhiked with my bag to Cedar City. I remember walking into this room with all these football players. They had like they were a big school. We had a 300-pound center, 280-pound tackles. I'm a buck 70, 75, something like that. And I'm thinking, there's no way I could make this football team. And I worked my butt off. You know, they fed you. We had 3-a-days. And I got to know the guys there. I was really liking them. The coaches were tough on us. And after there'd be cuts. You know, you see your name scratched off. And I kept making the cuts. And the third cut was coming. The coach told me this later. And they were going to cut me because this All-American, the very All-American that I was trying to beat out was giving me a hard time. And I remember I got mad at him, ripped his helmet off, started pounding him on the football field. That's my boxing came in. My stepdad, I guess. And the coaches really noticed that, and they said, I don't think we should cut Zoll. He's feisty.
There's some fire there.
And so they didn't cut me. And I ended up making the team. Me and one other guy was the only starting freshman. I got a full ride scholarship.
Wow.
Didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
And I made the football team, and I'm in college. And I think, I'm on my way. And I'm playing football, enjoying, thinking this is great. And I met this girl, a little redhead, 5'2", 110 pounds in psychology class next to me. I said, I don't know how to do this stuff. Will you help me? And she's tutoring me on getting me through because I had to keep, I think it was a 2.5 average. I didn't pick up my books for my full ride scholarship. I would some way just show up for class once in a while, go take the test. I'd go to Bonnie, what do you think's on the test this week? In some way, I passed the test. I kept my scholarship. But more importantly, I fell in love with this little redhead. And I thought, I have a girlfriend that I'm in love with. She's gorgeous. I have a scholarship. I'm having a great time. I end up, after that first year, went down to California where I worked in the tuna fish factories, bought myself a motorcycle, which I was always a motorcycle freak. Came back for the second year of football, played football that year, was in love with Bonnie. When I met the parents, I drove up, I had then a Harley Davidson chopper, Sportster extended front end, all chrome, Sportster tank, you probably, cherry flaked orange, which is a big deal then, and met the parents.
How'd that go?
They passed out. They said, Bonnie, what are you doing dragging him home? But they were wonderful people. Her dad became my really mentor. His name was Colley. He's the only dad I ever knew, and I loved the guy till he died. Grandma Katie loved me. She was 90 or something, and I would go and take care of her and fall in her front room and I made her laugh all the time. And I started to love that family. And I saw what it's like to have a family. And Bonnie was part of that. Well, me and my history, I was in trouble in college. They kicked me out. Here I am, full ride scholarship. Got the woman of my dreams.
Can you expound on trouble?
I might have to take the fifth on some.
Well,
the big thing, I drove my motorcycle in the student center. They didn't like that. I beat up the security guard. They didn't like that. Busted in the chief of police, chief cop car. They didn't like that. I busted up the pinball machines in the student center when I couldn't win. So stupid. But don't tell this to the kids, all right?
So good.
It's true. And so I got this notice. The coach fought hard for me because I was playing good football. And the notice came out and said, you are hereby suspended, terminated, and discharged from this institution, never to be reinstated again. I'm kicked out of college.
Wow.
And I thought, way to go, Zoll. I'd worked so darn hard, and I thought I was on my way, you know. And I wasn't going to church either because I didn't know yet you had to go to church. And so I wasn't fulfilling any of those kinds of things I'm supposed to. And so I ended up heading to San Diego with my bike, working there in Imperial Beach, hanging out at Tijuana. Got beat up by 2 Navy SEALs there, almost killed me. That's when I decided Navy SEALs are tough guys because I thought I was tough. And I got a draft notice. There was a Vietnam War going on then, and they were drafting. And I was able not to be drafted early because I was in college, and they had an exemption for that. But I ended up getting drafted, and you have 10 days to join the service of your choice. You're drafted for 2 years in the Army. I said, I'm not letting them tell me what to do. And so in San Diego, it had a block that you could walk around. It had all the services. It had the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard. And I walked around. I remember that whole block looking at their uniforms. And I stopped at the Marine Corps window. And I go, I like that uniform. Had a sword, I had this good-looking weapon. So I walked in there and I said, I've been drafted, but I think I'd rather be in the Army. I think I'd rather be a Marine. They go, come on here, sit down. Awesome. So I got enlisted for 4 years in the Marine Corps. And quite a changing event from a guy with no rules, no obedience, to go into boot camp where they teach you obedience in a hurry. Mm-hmm. Back then, they were very physical. But I learned how to be obedient. I learned discipline. I learned patriotism. I learned semper fidelis, which always stuck with me. All former Marines have it. Always faithful. I love that credo. I worked really hard in the Marine Corps, did all the push-ups, all the things. I ended up becoming a PFC out of boot camp, Lance Corporal out of infantry training, corporal in 8 months, which is like impossible in the Marines. I was a picture-perfect Marine. In the meantime, I stayed in touch with Bonnie, who foolishly enough stayed in touch with me.
And she was still at school?
She was at school. She ended up going to Utah State now.
Oh, okay.
And I would hitchhike on leave from San Diego and Oceanside to where's Utah State? They're in Logan.
Yeah.
To see her. Well, I'd been in the service in the Marines for about a year or so. I didn't look like I was getting orders to Vietnam because I was a good Marine in charge of a whole bunch of soldiers. I had no desire for marriage. I'd seen my mother in all her situations. I'd seen other bad situations. I didn't like the idea of marriage. I didn't like kids. And I don't know, I just kept thinking about it. And so I went to the PX and bought a diamond ring and hitchhiked to Utah State, and knelt down on a knee, which shocked me after I did these pros and cons. Should I marry, should I not marry? And she said yes. And we got engaged and married.
Did you get married in the temple or just civil?
We got married in the temple because I didn't know anything about it yet. Yeah. She was inactive, LDS. And she said, I think I'm supposed to get married in the temple. I go, okay, I guess I'm a Mormon. I hadn't been back to church, but I liked the feelings I had. Yeah. And I said, let's go she said, okay, let's get married in the temple. And it was a fabulous thing, except for one thing. Nobody told me anything about the temple.
You weren't quite prepared for that.
And I wasn't ready. And I said, I'm not going back. It wasn't until later that I started finding out what that was. Yeah. And the idea that I have learned, that I now appreciate, I took that girl to the temple and was married in the everlasting covenant of marriage for time and eternity, of which now I say, in the end, it all comes down to me and you, Bonnie. Mm-hmm. Love the kids, great family. They're all flying in the coop. They're all doing all this stuff. But you know what? It's me and you. And because of that everlasting covenant of marriage that you do in the temple, it's me and her. And Parker, I've learned to love that little woman more than I did when I met her. You don't get that anywhere else but the temple. Yeah. To be able to get that kind of a connection. We've been married 54 years. And happy am I and blessed. Anyway, I was getting ready to be a sergeant, the perfect Marine. Some gunnery sergeant comes up and starts giving me grief, pounding my chest about something. And I got in a fight with a gunnery sergeant. I end up in what they call a summary court-martial. Nobody knows this part. I ended up getting in an argument with the commanding officer that I had the right to do what I had to do. I should have had a lawyer. I got busted to Lance Corporal. Now, here we are, corporals, barely making a living.
Yeah.
I just get married. Me and my stupid fists get me in a fight and trouble as a perfect Marine headed for who knows what in the Marine Corps. I get busted. I think it was 2 weeks later, I get orders to Vietnam.
Wow.
The last thing I want to do is go to Vietnam. 53,000 great American soldier patriots had died. I'd had some experiences that told me I was going to die in Vietnam. I haven't told anybody this. First of all, it was after I was in the Marine Corps, there was a situation, well, before the Marine Corps, before Bonnie and I got married. Now, this sounds really odd, but it's true. Bonnie, sweet as she is, her and her little roommates at Utah State were playing the Ouija board.
Yeah.
They're saying, they ask all these stupid questions, and then it moves to tell you the answer. Mm-hmm. Totally operated by the dark side. and they asked, well, who's Bonnie going to marry? And it spells out some dude's name who she knew. To this day, I'm still jealous about this. And they asked, what happened to Bud? And it spells out, killed in Vietnam.
Wow.
Then after I actually got to Vietnam, I actually was at a spot where some guy came up to me in another billet. We were in Da Nang, and he said, it's weird. I had a dream about you. I don't even really know you. He says, I dreamed that I walked by this funeral home. You were in a casket in your dress blues. You'd been killed. I go, thanks, buddy. I'm sorry, but it was really a vivid dream. And another thing that happened while I was over there, I was ran in missing in action because I was in a deployment and I was a little late. And some way the word got out. And my mother and all my friends started spreading the rumor I'd been killed in Vietnam.
Wow.
And with all these things, and what that others happened a little bit later, but when I got there, I really felt I was going to not make it out of Vietnam. And there's a lot of good soldiers who didn't. And just as we were getting ready to leave in country, and leaving my wife and crying, it was awful. She came to California and visited me, and I put her on a jet plane to go back to Utah to say goodbye. And I actually thought that was the last time I'd see her. I remember sitting at the end of the runway watching her plane take off as the song came on, Leaving on a Jet Plane, thinking that's the last time I'm going to see Bonnie. And I'm like emotional, and I'm not very easy to get emotional. And so I end up headed to Vietnam, of which I think it was a week before Bonnie came and came to see me, and I got on the airplane to go home. We found out she did the dumbest thing she'd ever done. She got pregnant.
Right before you left.
Had to be her fault only. I go, what are you talking? You can't be pregnant. I'm pregnant.
Wow.
So I'm headed to Vietnam. I lost my stripe, demoralized, thinking I'm going to die, leaving my woman, my favorite person on the planet, with a child, and I didn't even want kids. I didn't like to have that kid. I'd never been around kids. And so when I head to Vietnam, I have all this on my mind, and then you get to Vietnam, and it's an awful thing, war. It does awful things to you and to people, and we all did things that we'd regret, and I've repented for, and I've got PTSD that I've forgotten about everything mostly that we end up doing. And was able to get in the air wing. I was able to fly in helicopters, a left-hand gunner, and I was on convoy duty up Highway 1, and a lot of things happened. But to cope with war, Parker, you have lots of ways to do that. Now, remember, here I am, sort of a Mormon, not really into it yet. I didn't realize what you're supposed to do. I hadn't really figured out all this praying you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to live a gospel life according to the principles of Jesus, And my friends are all the way you cope. Everybody's smoking dope, opium-soaked marijuana, and lots of ways to try to cope with that whole situation. And I'm partaking. And I'm feeling bad about it. And Bonnie's writing me letters, and she's showing me pictures of her being pregnant. And it's just like a different world to me. I'm just not meshing it all together yet. I'm just figuring out how to try to survive it all. And the next real event happened. You figure out how a chain of events can happen, and if someone's really watching out for you, if you really have a destiny, if God really cares. I look back at it. I can testify he does. I'm in a billet with some of our friends, and they were smoking weed and talking, and it's a rough time. And some guy breaks out LSD. Remember LSD?
I personally don't. But
Well, it's a hallucinogenic drug. He said, man, you got to try this. It's the greatest, better than anything you've ever done. And it's called dropping acid. And he was getting ready for all of us to have an acid trip. And all of a sudden, in the back of my mind, I thought of these doggone two missionaries and all this weird things. And I remember them telling me about drugs and how it's a fake. And I remember asking this Marine, I said, hey, wait a minute, I've heard this stuff bad for you and it's not that great. What's so great about it? I'm happy. I don't need any of this stuff. And he said, Bud, it's the greatest thing you'll ever feel, recognize. I said, what? Tell me about it. And he said, well, the best way I can explain it, you just feel love and appreciation and everything. You feel this high. You'll never feel a sensation in any other way that's awesome. And he gave me this example. He said, it's like holding a baby. I never even held a baby.
yeah.
He goes, and you look at it and you can just feel this love and closeness with this baby, And I remembered that was the same example this missionary had given me about how you feel a spiritual, loving moment, like holding a newborn, how wonderful and sweet it is. Immediately, I knew the drug was a counterfeit to a spiritual experience. Immediately, I felt I cannot partake. Immediately, I knew if I were to do that, I'm done. I'm headed down this path of drugs, alcohol, everything that's bad. And I related to my family that were non-LDS and the unhappiness they found in alcohol and abuse. And I said, I will not partake. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. He said, what's the matter with you, Zoll? You big chicken? Come on, man. I was a big shot there in the Marines, And I walked out, which is hard because the peer pressure was enormous. And I took with me my buddy Nate, who was a gunner on the left, we call him right-hand gunner. And he says, why did we do that? But why did we do that? I said, because that's a bad scene, Nate. We don't want to be there. And I says, you know something? Did you know I'm a Mormon? I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He goes, no. I go, yeah, I am. He said, I'm a Catholic. And we went into a bunker, a billet. We sandbag, that you get rocket attacks at night. I was in this area in Chulai then, and I was there. It's dark, and him and I started talking. I started recanting what happened to me and how I got to college and these missionaries and how I was married to this beautiful woman and how I'm screwing up. And I can tell that's a bad thing. That's a total counterfeit. And they said, and he says, man, that's so cool. And all of a sudden, we had this very enormous experience that's really sacred to me that I don't really talk about. in the bunker, in the dark, where I knew the gospel was true. I knew I was on the wrong path. And I knew Satan had me by the clutches and his followers. And I knew that if I didn't change it, I was going to die in Vietnam and not see my family and I would know what the future was. It was a dead end. And I made, in that bunker, a promise. I said, God, if you'll get me out of here alive, if you'll let me see my baby and my wife, I promise you, I will do my very best to live these principles that this church and the gospel doctrine of Christ has told me I should do. And I made that promise, and I felt this lifting of this burden about me. And I went out of that bunker. I found 2 missionaries, returned missionaries who were Marines. We started having a church service every time I could get there to the rear. We'd pass the sacrament. We had these marvelous experiences. I felt these amazing experiences that bore to my soul that this is the true church. If you will stay the course, I will give you blessings untold. I believed it. I got through it, stopped all my bad stuff, bad habits, got rid of those friends that were giving me that direction, got my stripes back, ended up a sergeant, was discharged honorably from Vietnam with all kinds of things, ended up getting home. I'll never forget my homecoming with Bonnie. We met in Vegas, where to me it was our second honeymoon, and all Bonnie could talk about was Tammy. Oh, by the way, while I was in Vietnam, I got a notice from the Red Cross. Congratulations, it's a girl. That's how I knew I had a baby girl. And we talked about it through the mail, and we decided to name her Tammy. I like Tammy or Tamra. Your little cute mother-in-law. But, being the first was kind of odd because I got home when Bonnie said, we got to go get home. We got to go see Tammy. And I'm so happy just to be with Bonnie and back in the States and out of it. I said, relax. Let's just hang here. I've stayed here for a month. We got to go back. Don't you want to see your daughter? I go, yeah, I guess so. I'd never even seen her. I'd never even held a baby, Parker.
How old was she at this point?
She's 6 months old. So we come driving home, and the whole family, her family's all there in a big circle in the house, and I'm in my uniform, and they're all excited to see me, the return soldier from Vietnam and Bonnie, and we're happy, and we come strolling up there, and Bonnie breaks loose and runs and grabs Tammy and is hugging Tammy. She runs over, and all the family's watching me. She hands me this baby, and I go, huh. And I hand her back.
Cool.
And all the family goes, oh, what a luck. Of course, now we hug all the dogs. I'm the most affectionate dad on the whole planet, But poor Tammy took the brunt of me learning how to be a dad with Tammy, And she was more of the mentor than I was at the beginning. Anyway, we get back and things change. I'm learning how to cope with the crying and all this stuff and trying to figure out how to be a father. I'm brand new at it. We're starting to go to church. And I'm realizing something, Parker, that I'd missed all those years of my life. These are good people. I was going to a Sunday school class and listening to people talk about good principles and how to be compassionate, how to love one another. I listen to sacrament meetings that people bear their testimony about the road to happiness and the plan of salvation. And I say, what's so bad about this church? It's not a cult. Good, not perfect people, none of us. Following certain principles that I started working on and becoming obedient to, and taking on church jobs And I was a young men's president. I liked working with these kids. And I got in the bishopric. And I liked working with these people and seeing these things that are going and how they're growing. And I fell in love with this doggone cult. And I started raising my family. The number one thing that I really learned about how to raise family, I had Tammy. Then we had Alicia, my second daughter, while I was in college. And I was able to graduate from college. I learned how to study. I did still come back and play football. They did reinstate me. Oh, you're you're a veteran. Okay, we're gonna let you back in.
He's reformed.
I'm reformed. Now it was a really positive story. A guy that was a total failure comes back, and Bonnie started teaching me how to study. I had no idea because in the back of my mind, I was stupid because my counselor said, "You are stupid. Join the Army." And Bonnie said, "You aren't stupid. Here, study." And the first semester, she started teaching me how to study, and I got all A's except art. I got a C. And Bonnie said, "You can do this." And that destroyed me. Then I got a 4 for the next 3 years.
Wow.
And I said, "I guess I know how to study, thanks to Bonnie. And I'm not as stupid as I thought, thanks to this country. They give me an opportunity. And now I'm able to have things going. I have these 2 daughters. We have marvelous experiences that I say, this is how it's supposed to be. Well, we still had our struggles, of course. And I coached football for 1 year. And I loved it, except they didn't make any money. I said, maybe I ought to make some money. And so I tried to, took the LSAT, and I got into BYU Law School, which was a miracle. Bonnie and I worked really hard together. I had no family except her parents and Bonnie and I. We had 2 girls, and I really wanted a boy. Got out, started practicing law, learned a lot, became a litigator, saw it all, heard it all, tried hundreds of cases, did divorces, did personal injury cases, learned all the ropes. The greatest institution in America, not perfect. Had 2 more girls. I loved them all. Said, gosh. But in law school, I had a patriarchal blessing, said, you're going to have a boy. So I had another one. It was Wade, my beloved son. So we finally had 4 girls and a boy. And I remember people said, they're all great kids, all strong, healthy, well, thank God. And they said, well, what'd you do? I say, well, I beat them, but I really didn't. I said, I learned a couple of principles of how to raise kids. One is you love them to death. They know you'll give them both kidneys. Second was discipline. I got in the Marine Corps. Certain rules aren't broken. Third is I'd have interviews every fast Sunday. That's where I got to know. Like, you can live in the same house and not communicate. Mm-hmm. That's where I taught my kids the birds and the bees. Mm-hmm. Under the influence of my child sitting there and me sitting here, and we have open discussion like this. Mm-hmm. And then we have a prayer after. And it just united our family. Coupled with Bonnie. It was her insistence we'd have dinner every night. Okay, I'd be working like hard. I'd come home every night. She'd have dinner ready. And we'd sit around the table, and Bonnie, in her sweet, kind way, would give her examples of how grow up, and I'd give mine about all the experiences I had that day from people hating each other, shooting each other, divorcing each other, and I would share all of that. And through that, we would go to church then every week. We'd have family home evening. I bought a boat so we could all do things together at Lake Powell. And our family was unified because we lived the principles and held on to that iron rod, which I'm a believer to this day is what broke that chain you're talking about for me. And I was able to raise these beautiful children into now I've got 4 beautiful daughters, a great son, 25 grandchildren, 6 beautiful great-grandchildren. And I'm a happy man with a happy life, living the everlasting covenant of marriage with the woman that I want for time and eternity, all because of 2 missionaries, not being afraid to talk to some low-life kid that was from Compton and had no family into getting baptized, and then the inspiration that came through these chains of events that made my family and me who we are today. So I'm pretty committed to, there's only one path, brother. And all my friends that follow the other one, I say, don't fall off that path, stay that course. I tell that to my kids because it's so easy with all the noise and the confusion and the temptations, because I had them all. Mm-hmm. I've been there. I think that's what makes me stronger, is because I saw what it's like to live that side, and I now know the difference and the path that it leads to, and where this path is really a one that's true happiness and joy. And Bonnie and I are really enjoying our life right now. We're still healthy. I know that might change. Everybody in this great planet has the same opportunity. We have this great country, this promised land, that we're able to get the opportunity to believe how we want, what religion we want. And I like all Christian faiths. I like all faiths. They're good in so many ways. There's a dark side, what I don't like. But if you will follow that path, stay that course, especially in this gospel that teaches the principles of the gospel of Christ, there's no other way to say it, but you'll find true happiness, because the Lord will intervene, give you direction like he did me. We went on a mission. We got called on a mission to Ghana, Africa.
Yeah, so Lexi, my wife, was in high school, right?
Right. I sort of wanted to serve a mission because I love those missionaries, but I was working really hard. And I didn't want to leave. And I was a little selfish about it.
Why did you decide to serve a mission?
I always thought I'd like to kind of baptize one person. And I sort of wanted to think I needed it to go, I wanted to give back. But it was really Bonnie snuck in our mission papers. She comes and says, hey, I turned our paper. I said, what? She says, you need to start to slow down in your business, and we ought to go on a mission now, because the kids are out married. And I said, okay. And so, I remember she put on the mission papers a couple of things that were important to her that I agreed with, is that one, we didn't really want to learn a language. And two, we're supposed to, senior missionaries, get to make a call where we want to go. We didn't want to go to, and she named a few places, including Africa. And the reason she named Africa, because I had a really bad experience in Africa, Ghana, Africa, just outside of Kumasi, where me and some of my friends went over and bought some gold, diversifying our portfolio, had the practice going on. We always had, real estate was kind of down right then. And we went and bought some gold, got to know some of these Ghanaian entrepreneurs, and ultimately they stole all of our money.
Wow.
A whole bunch of money. I had to go back to Africa to try to get it back, almost killed a couple of times, a big, long experience. And so I hated and thought Ghanaians were all crooked and would steal everything you had. And so that's why Bonnie put in there, I don't want to go to Africa. I don't think my husband will really like it, because we lost our money and it was embarrassing,
Yeah.
And so the missionary department said, yeah, you're a senior missionary, you get to make your call, kind of, and so you get to make where you want to go. And it says, but would you mind, we're going to recommend you go to a Portuguese-speaking, probably Brazil mission with your law background and what you've got in your testimony of the faith. Will you learn Portuguese? I said, yeah, we'll do that. We prayed about it. I said, sure. Well, so we know we're going
to Brazil
then, to learn the Portuguese. So I call all the family, I got my grandkids, my wife and Bonnie sitting next to me, and we're all there getting our mission call somewhere to Brazil, we're learning Portuguese. And Bonnie opens the call and is reading it, and she says, and all of a sudden she opens it, and she looks down at it, and I hear her go, oh no. And I look over and I go, what? I go, just read it. You have hereby been called to Ghana, Cape Coast Mission, Africa. And I go, very funny, give me that. And I look at that, it says Ghana, that's Africa, right where I had been and hated and lost money and didn't like Ghanaians. I throw it on the ground, Parker. And I look up at all my kids and grandkids. They're going, Grandpa, where's your testimony? I stomp out. Bonnie goes and gets me, brings me back in the front room and says, Grandpa's going to be fine. He's going to talk to the missionary department. I call the missionary department. What's going on? You said we go where we wanted. We don't want to go to Africa. I don't like Africa. We don't know. We went into the apostle to come back Africa. I said, send it back. They did. They said back, you need to go to Ghana, Africa. I go, talk about test your faith. Here I am, this stalwart now. Yeah. Been through all these experiences. You think that I would say, I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord. Well, I'm not buying this one. And so I finally repent, say, okay, we're going to go to Africa. And Bonnie and I go serve our mission in Ghana, Africa as senior missionaries in charge of 70 wonderful, amazing missionaries, which we find is a privilege and life-changing. Remember I said I wanted to baptize one person? I brought some missionaries in, and we found a village. We taught all these amazing Ghanaian saints, sweet people, poverty, nothing they have but the gospel. And we baptized 42 people in a river in one day.
It's amazing.
That's what I brought. Lexi came over and her brother. I said, we're having this kind of fun event. Will you come on? They let me bring them over, and she participated. She made this video, actually. That's where she probably must have known she was going to be involved with video people because she made this great video of that baptism, which was marvelous. I learned to love those people, Parker. You tell me that the Lord doesn't know what he's doing, that the Lord doesn't have a spot for you in your destiny. We opened up branches. We baptized. We saved 2 missionaries' lives. I learned to love the people I never thought I could love. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget in an interview in one of those baptisms, a little 9-year-old boy. You know, we do an interview before you get baptized. And he thought he wasn't passing this interview. And he looks up at me and says, Elder Zoll, I know I'm not answering these questions, but I know I should be a member of this church. I love this church and what it represents. I want to be a member and be baptized so bad. And that moment, Parker, you know, you have a few experiences in your life where you have these really direct promptings like call the coach, marry that girl. I mean, I've had the opportunity to have a few of those. And I had the most overwhelming, powerful statement come to my mind that said, Elder Zoll, I love that little 9-year-old poverty boy who has nothing, no future, except for being a member of this great church and getting all the benefits and rewards I'm going to give him in the next life. I love him as much as I do you and anyone else. I felt that spirit. And I said, of course we're going to baptize you, brother. I knew at that moment that God loves all of his children. If he loved some kid that was illegitimate, born in poverty, raised in Compton, kicked out of school, a total disaster, to line me up with the opportunities I found when I promised that I would live this gospel. He loved me, he loves you, and that 9-year-old boy in Africa. And there's an opportunity that he wants to give everybody in this planet of salvation. I know it with all my heart. I believe it. It's happened to me. If people will but embrace what's out there. And I learned that from some amazing people through school, through law school. I was able to meet Dallin Oaks. I was able to meet Rex Lee, who taught me basic principles I had questions about, where I knew I've come to find there's an answer for them all, and I'm always wondering, well, what about that? What about? Then there comes a time when you really just have faith because you know by the fruits of this great gospel what it brings, and it's in my family. I've been blessed with all this enormous group, and I'm just grateful and a happy guy. And I'll tell all my kids, I love them with all my heart. Stay the course. This is where life and happiness is. I know what happens when you get off course, and I know we all need corrections, but stay the course and you'll find life and happiness in this life and the next life, which is the best, because that kingdom is the greatest reward of all.